look, is the bore of the cylinder, and also the end gap of the first ring, because this is the first ring that I installed, which is 0.350. So I must select the gauge here, 0.3381 of a millimeter. So that is this gauge. So this is this end gap. Show this one. Show this one. The first ring 0.35. Okay, and the cylinder bore. Okay, check again. Check something again. Cylinder bore. Let's see this thing. Okay, yeah. And also I'm going to check the inner diameter of the stained the cylinder bore, which is 100. Okay, that's fine. So let's go. I'm going to test it. I've already selected this one. Let's go and check that gap. That I selected. Then let's check it. Let's check the gap here. Let's check the gap. Yeah, I'm sure it fits well. Ne? It fits very, very, very well. And the other one thing that we are going to do is the cylinder size. Check it with the vernier. Okay, this is the size of the bore, and other side, from other side, it's fine, and then other side, it's fine, and then this one, it's fine, this one, yeah, it's fine, then this one, fine. It has no flare. So okay, then yeah, so let's use two tools, because sometimes this thing might be wrong, might tell us wrong. Then anyway, okay, let's check with this engineering ruler if it gives us 100 millimeter from 0. Yes, it is 100. I'm sure everybody is satisfied. It gives us 100. You see it? It's 100, ne? Yeah, it is 100. And then look here. What does it say here? What does it say here? The inner bore must be 100. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so it's sharp. So guys, this ring, I've tried to fit it there, then the gap here is not of the correct size. So that's why I'm trying to take this part, a little portion of this part, so that it will fit well. Okay, it must not be that big, just a little. This is a 5, so I think it's right. Well then guys, now I will explain to you why is it important for us to do that measurement that you just saw. The end gap of the what is it called, of the rings of the engine. Yeah, this is just a cylinder, and then actually that filler gauge, I was putting that what do we call it, that ring inside the cylinder, like this, like this, like this, like this. And you know that at the end there will be a gap. This gap, you have to push this thing down a little bit down with your piston, because you will have already taken out your piston. It must be a little distance away, just say maybe 50 millimeter down inside the bore. So this gap here is it that we need to measure it with a filler gauge and compare it with what is in the spec, the specifications of that particular engine that we will be working on at that particular moment. Okay, the importance of measuring this gap, if you do not measure this gap and you don't consider it, and then you don't compare it with that one which is in the spec book of that particular vehicle, then you're going to have a problem. Sometimes the manufacturer just make these things for you to go, and then you have to scratch either this portion or this portion of the ring so that it gets a little bit bigger, and then to the level of the filler gauge prescribed by your manufacturer as per your manufacturer specification, right? So imagine if this thing, when everything gets hot, that is in science, it's a common sense science. They say when something is heated up, it expands. Then it expands and it changes the sizes. We might be having this. Let's say this is our ring, and then the gap here by manufacturer, maybe it should be 0.25 of a millimeter. That is 1/4 of a millimeter. That's a quarter of a millimeter. So they know, those people, because of they have already seen and have made the tests in various conditions. When this engine gets hot, then this space, because this thing will expand, then this thing will come closer to here, closer, or almost making a complete cycle. So when there's a compression inside this thing, then we don't lose the compression. It just goes up and down smoothly without some leaks. So imagine if like we haven't measured this gap, and then maybe the gap itself, after we have just inserted this particular rings inside these things, the gap is very small, maybe it's less than the specified measurement of the engineers. So maybe let's say it's just 0.1 millimeter. Okay, so this thing, when it gets hot, yeah, the engine will run. When you start the engine, it will start and it will run. But once you have started that thing, then the engine starts to heat up, and then when it heats up, then the two things will come together, up until they meet like this. And then remember, and then this thing still wants to expand more, and then there's no way to can for it to can go. So what will happen? It will expand inside the cylinder, and then what will cause? It will cause an excessive wear prematurely inside the cylinder. So after some years, you'll find that you'll have to go and change the cylinders of your engine, just because this gap was not taken into consideration when these rings were first installed by the technician or whosoever installed them. So be careful of this gap, guys. It's very important. And conversely, if this gap is too big, again, it will cause a problem, because you will lose some compressions through that hole, through that the gap that is there. Because if this thing expands, it must go and go and go and just meet like this. And then this thing, for it to go and meet like this, is as per specified, because the engineers has tested that thing and then have taken it to a variety of heats that that particular engine will be subjected to. So that is the most important part, this gap, because it can cause a prematured wear of your engine bore or cylinder. So I'm sure I explained this thing better as I can, guys. I think everything's fine. Okay.